Hey, what's up guys, it's Nick2. Today I wanted to real quickly just go over the early endgame version of a Spiritborn build that is going to allow you guys to get to Torment 4 as soon as humanly possible in just about 12 hours of playtime without like any super insane gear or anything out of the ordinary. I mean, I've only been able to play for 12 hours. I was able to unlock Torment 4 without really much difficulty at all, and I've been absolutely blasting, having a great time. So I just wanted to quickly go over what my build is, how you guys can set it up, and just go over some general tips so that you can get some of the gear needed in order to actually get into Torment 4 ASAP. How you want to set the build up while kind of progressing the difficulty tiers is different than what you want it to be when it is fully min-maxed. I'm going to have a fully min-maxed version of the build, of course, once I actually perfect it, etc. So feel free to subscribe for that. But in the meantime, you need to get up to Torment 4, right? So I just want to show you guys what you're capable of doing within like 12 hours of game time, and kind of just go over the build and explain to you guys how it works. I streamed the entire process over on Twitch, and I would love to see more of you guys around. I've also been streaming on YouTube, so feel free to check me out there. There are some Twitch drops going on, so if you guys want some free cosmetics, and as you can see in the bottom, wherever the hell I put it, there's a gifted sub thing going on, so you can get this mount. If you gift 2 subs, you get the mount. Here, I'll show you down here. If you give 2 subs, you get this mount, and if you give 4 subs, you get this mount armor. Helps support me a ton. If you like the videos, helps me out a lot. As always as well, the build link will be down in the description. It is over on Mobalytics. Highly recommend you guys check it out. Not only do I have a full setup for the end game that you guys can copy, which is pretty much what I'm using right now. It's still somewhat work in progress because I need to math out a lot of stuff, but I also have a full leveling guide. So if you guys are still in the process of leveling up, you can transition from the leveling build to the end game build to the mythic build very easily. Also, feel free to drop a favorite on it. Helps me out a lot. Let's just get into it. I'm going to do my best to explain the build pretty quickly. If you want like an in-depth guide to it, I will be working on that in a more perfected version, which is going to go into a lot of math and a lot of more of how the build actually works. This build, or this video rather, is just going to be a very quick rundown of how you want to set it up, and also what are some things you want to prioritize gear-wise so that you can get the build rolling and get into Torment 4 like literally within a few hours. I went to pretty good detail in my leveling build, so if you want to know much more detail about the build, feel free to just watch that video. But for now, I'm just going to speed run this so you guys can get in game and blast. When it comes to our skill, we are using Quill Volley. This simply just does the most damage out of all of our skills. Our other option is Touch of Death, but that is a little bit more gear requirement, or has a bit more of a gear requirement compared to it. So for the purposes of this build, we are going with Quill Volley. Quill Volley, it just does really good damage. Pair it with this aspect, it boomerangs back. You stand in the center of mobs, and it just does really good damage. Our other skills here, we have permanent uptime on them as a result of our key passive, which we'll talk about in a second. But because we have permanent uptime and our cooldowns are really low, as I will demonstrate here, we have very, very low cooldown on all of these skills. We are basically using stuff that just gives us temporary buffs. So Scourge gives us 50% increased crit damage, or damage against crowd-controlled enemies. It gives us crazy healing. Armored Hide gives us unstoppable, 100% block, extra DR while we're blocking, and it is our access to maximum resolve stacks. Hunter is extra ferocity stacks, 100% increased damage against injured, and it procs a lot of the passives in our skill tree for extra damage after using an ultimate. Ravager gives us 30% increased vigor generation while it's up, and it also helps us with some mobility. And then Counterattack gives us 100% dodge while it is active, and 30% crit damage multi, so it is good defensively as well as offensively. The crux of this build, and the singular most important thing to get the build rolling, is the Rod of Kapelike. The way that this works is basically your core skill also counts as a basic skill. So it makes our Quill Volley count as not only a core, but also a basic skill. Anytime that you are not at maximum vigor, your Quill Volley will cost 0 vigor, and then it'll do reduced damage. But when you are at maximum vigor, your core skill is going to consume all of your vigor. So right now I'm not at max, but then I got to max, and then you can see it's going to instantly drop. And then based on how much vigor you had when you cast it, it's going to gain 3% increased crit damage for each point. So if I have 200 vigor, that is a 600% crit damage multi, and that hit is also going to be a guaranteed crit, so you don't have to go out of your way to scale crit chance. This is a disgusting amount of damage. Obviously, though, the issue is how are you going to maintain casting a skill that is going to cost all of your vigor every single second? The main way that we can do this is with Ring of the Midnight Sun. Anytime that you crit, you regained 50% of the vigor that you spent in the last 2 seconds. If we scale some resource generation in the form of 30% on Ravager, 15% in the skill tree, and then resource gen on rings, and then some in Paragon board, etc. This 50% number gets closer to 100%, and then every single time that we crit, we get our entire vigor bar back. So quickly just look at my Vigor bar. I don't have enough resource gen as I would like, nor is my ring a 50% roll. So sometimes some of my hits aren't crits, but the majority of my hits are crits, and as a result, my Vigor is pretty much filled up all of the time. So I'm able to just spam and gain access to this crazy damage multiplier all of the time. Then the question is, how can you get these immediately? I was able to get one the second that I entered Endgame, and it's because I knew how to get it, and that is by the first way that I got, or the way that I got my first one, and what I'd recommend you guys do, is save all of your obols. If you go and gamble at the obol guy, there's a very decent chance that it drops a unique. If you have multiple Spiritborn friends, I'd recommend all of you guys do this. You can also go into your seasonal blessing here, and you can reallocate your seasonal blessing and then put it into Urn of Obols here. Or sorry, not that one. You can put it into Urn of Curiosity so that when you go and buy the stuff at the gambling vendor, you have a higher chance of getting extra items. I would wait until you're in Torment difficulty, because when you're in Torment, it has a chance of dropping at Ancestral. So you can save your Obols. You can also get Obols by just farming the pit, so it's a decent way of farming that if you wanted to try to get a Capellique. Right out of the gate, you could just go farm pit or do anything else that gives you obols, and then you can go and gamble at the vendor, and you'll have a pretty good chance of getting it. Otherwise, Rod of Capellique will drop off of Duriel as well as Endariel. So if you guys get the mats for Duriel and Endariel, then you can go do that, and you'll have a pretty good chance of getting it. I wouldn't really recommend spending boss mats too early on into the game, but if you really just need to get the weapon immediately, it's probably worth it. You can get a lot of boss mats by using Seething of Opal of Torment, or you can try to finish the entirety of the seasonal journey, and that gives you some boss materials as well. Next to that is getting Ring of the Midnight Sun. You can use the exact same tip that I just gave you with the obols and try to get the ring just by gambling rings, or you can go kill Gregor. It's much easier to get Living Steel than it is mats for Duriel, so killing Gregor early on, spending your mats on that is probably perfectly fine, and the ring drops rather regularly, so it should be really easy for you to go get this. Once you have these two things paired together, your damage is going to start to skyrocket. While we're on the topic of uniques, I may as well mention Empawaka. This is very good, and you can also do the exact same thing, where if you have obols, you can just gamble for helmets, or you can go kill Beast in Ice, I know drops this. There's probably one other boss, but I'm not sure which one it is. If you know, just leave it down in the comments. This is very good. It gives you a 90% damage multi. According to your secondary Spirit Hall choice, your skills also count as whatever that skill that you selected in the Spirit Hall is. But it also makes you do 30% increased damage per spirit type that your skill has. Mine is Eagle, Jaguar, and Gorilla, so I'm getting 90% damage increase, and I'm using the Spirit Hall Gorilla to give me some barrier, as well as the Spirit Hall Jaguar to give me increased maximum ferocity stacks. This could also be Centipede if you wanted healing, but we're not really poisoning enemies, and we already have Gorilla otherwise, so we just go for Jaguar. Also, actually, no, we want it to be Jaguar. The reason Jaguar is also good and why this helmet is also good is we get access to Furnace, which we otherwise wouldn't, which just gives us some extra damage. Outside of that, our second best way of scaling damage is with unyielding hits. This gives us additional weapon damage based on our total armor. I'm scaling a ton of armor right now, so in Torment 4, I currently am at 3,600 armor. So if we just pop that in a calculator real quick, 3,600 times 0.38 is 1,300. So I'm getting a 1,300 weapon damage increase. And currently my weapon, if you don't know, everything in the game scales off of your weapon damage. Currently my weapon only has 596. So I'm getting effectively a triple, almost more than a triple damage increase as a result of scaling my armor and having unyielding hits on my amulet. Unyielding hits does cap out at 1,500, so at a certain point you would want to swap this to your ring, which is where we have adaptability, or sorry, Moonrise, and then we would put Moonrise on our amulet. Moonrise is really good. It just gives us a multiplicative damage increase for our Quill Volley, which counts as a basic skill, and it gives us movement speed, and it gives us attack speed. But because unyielding hits is so good, it makes scaling armor into a actual damage increase. So we want things like percent total armor on our amulet. We want disobedience, and I even went for Juggernaut this early on. Later on into the game, you will be able to have more armor with a more min-max setup, in which case you will not need Juggernaut anymore. But early on, it is very good for scaling unyielding hits. Until you gain access to Capellique, you want to put unyielding hits on your two-hander, and that'll give you a ton of damage. Now that we've gone over how to actually scale our damage, let's talk about, and there's some more stuff to talk about in that department, but another thing is survivability, which is a pain in the ass because resistances are very hard to come by. One great thing that you can do for resistances is to get Rakanoth's Wake. It just comes with a very high amount of all res on it by default if you have one that is non-greater affix, and you upgrade it a little bit, it has a ton of resistance on it. Otherwise, you can get all resistance rolls on things like pants, gloves, and boots, and your rings. You could even get like this right here, 18% all res is very, very nice. And then you can slam in some diamonds, get some all resistance in the Paragon board, and then that'll help you. As you climb higher torment levels, you're going to need more and more resistance and more armor. You can see that even in Torment 4 right now with this insane item, I am not resistance capped. I was when I actually went and got Torment 4, and that's because I used an incense that gave me 10% all res. But if you're in Torment 3 or Torment 2, the resistance requirement is much lower and it is significantly easier to actually reach. Just keep in mind that when you're looking at your gear, that is going to be a consideration you have to make a lot is, am I going to lose out on resistance? If you lose out on resistance, you're going to have a bad time survivability-wise. Our other best way to scale our survivability is simply by just getting maximum life on things like chest, gloves, pants, boots, even ring. Max HP is extremely potent for just scaling your survivability. Another fantastic thing that I would look out for is runes. Runes are particularly good, and one of the best way to get runes is with the, make sure you go and unlock the Undercity ASAP. That is very good. And then you'll get Tributes of Harmony anytime that you do stuff in the pit. Or not in the pit, sorry. You'll just get a chance of doing this anytime you just do pretty much anything. But I seem to get a lot of them to drop in the pit. If you do this in a group, every single one of you guys will get runes, and then the runes are particularly strong. Currently, the best one that you want is, it's called TAM, but you can also get POC is pretty good, as well as CIR. Those are some of the best generating ones. The way that these work is basically you need one rune that generates, and then you need one rune that spends. So for example, this one, if I travel 5 meters, I will generate 50 offering. And then this one, if it requires 5 offering, but then it restores 1 primary resource, or this one requires 100 offering, and then invokes a Pestilence Swarm. I'm using Darkshroud Shadow, which is very good for survivability, paired with Seer, so I just gain 30% DR all the time from Darkshrouds. And then the best one is the Earthen Bulwark via Druid. Anytime that you just spend some resource or whatever your generator is, you'll get the Bulwark, and this gives you a ton of barrier. Currently, I am at 100% barrier. As you can see, my barrier is exactly what my HP is, so I'm just getting 4600 barrier as a result of having the Earthen Bulwark plus the Gorilla's Spirit Hall here. The Earthen Bulwark is not only good for survivability, but it also scales our Viscous Shield here to give us a 33% damage multiplier, which is quite good. Those are some of the most important takeaways and how you actually want to go about obtaining some of these things. Now I'm just going to get into the nitty gritty of the skill tree, individual things that you want on each roll of gear, and I'll go into the Paragon board, etc. But you could just refer to the build link at this point if you want, and what I just explained should be enough to kind of teach you how the build works and also to get your feet off the ground. When it comes to skill tree, Quill Volley, and you grab the extra damage, and then we go Vigorous as well as Balance Exertion for damage, some Vuln damage, damage reduction. Mirage is actually worthless here, so I can take that 1 point out, go into Follow Through or something, that's fine. Or actually, I'll go into Armor Tide here. I max out Armor Tide because the more points you put into it, the more cooldown reduction you get via Prodigy's Tempo. Prodigy's Tempo is insane. Basically, you just get a ridiculous amount of cooldown reduction as a result of just spamming your abilities here. So you get your cooldowns infinitely. Having more ranks into the Armored Hide gives you more cooldown reduction for it, and it makes it last longer. Perseverance is very good for survivability. Anti-Venom helps with resistance. Counterattack. Scourge with the heal is insane healing. Resilient for healing. Brilliance for damage. And then Potent and Furnace are crazy for damage. Resolution, Spiritual Attunement, and Supremacy for more damage. Hunter, and then Prodigy's Tempo. Skill tree is pretty basic there. When it comes to our Paragon board, I will have this in the description. I would highly recommend, depending upon your resistance situation, I like to go out of my way to get boards that have resistance early on. So I grab this board, which is Sapping, which not only gives you some vigor back, it also gives you crazy damage multi. It also has maximum resource and resource gen, so you can better scale your Ring of the Midnight Sun. It also has a ton of all-res here, and we can put Menagerist Glyph here, which is pretty good to scale our maximum resource more. Also has some attack speed, which is quite nice. Then I went to Viscous Shield. Do not go into Viscous Shield until you get Earthen Bulwark. Until then, it is basically useless. And you can also scale your barrier generation. You need exactly 55% barrier generation for your Earthen Bulwark to max out your barrier, to then get max value out of Viscous. Currently, I am at, where's my barrier? Currently, I am at 60% barrier generation, so anytime that I proc my Bulwark here, which I'll just show you, I get to exactly 100% of my barrier, so I'm getting full value out of Viscous Shield and just a full barrier, which is basically doubling my HP. Spirit is your best glyph to level up early on, probably, and then I also got Revealing, and I grabbed some armor and some max HP and some attack speed. Again, the Paragon board will be in the description. You can swap it based on what your current situation is and what your level is. If you don't have Viscous Shield, you could go into Revealing early on. And keep in mind, I will have Fulminate, but I will have Convergence, but that board isn't actually good until you get Fulminate and you have it leveled up. If I can find Fulminate, I can't find it, but Fulminate just gives you increased lightning damage, and Convergence board will not give you increased damage until you have Fulminate pretty juiced up. So quickly speedrun stats on gear, and I'll talk about Mercenary real quick. You want the helmet. Masterwork doesn't really matter. Try to get damage reduction, I guess. Alternatively, you could use Crown of Lucion, and if you don't have this helmet, just use a normal helmet with armor, cooldown reduction, max HP, or dexterity. Chest, you want dex, max HP, armor. If you want armor on pieces so that you can scale your unyielding hits, but if you can't get armor on certain pieces, go for resistance. Instead, if you need the resistance, dex and armor, I need to kind of math out which one gives more damage. It kind of also depends on how much dex and stuff you have, but generally this is what I would go out of your way for. And then you want to temper utility barrier generation until you get to 55%, and then otherwise you can temper some resistances, or you can temper maximum resolve stacks, which you'll have in the endgame version of it. Gloves, dex, max HP, and then you want ranks 2 quill volley, and you could swap the dex for armor as well. Barrier gen, and then you want to temper on basic skill damage. Pants, same thing as the chest, basically, dex, armor, or max HP, and then you want ranks to basic skills because our quill volley counts as both a core and a basic skill, and then barrier gen, and then temper, probably maximum resolve stacks, but armor is a damage increase as well until we reach the threshold that unyielding hit stops giving us extra damage. So up to you if you want to temper armor or maximum resolve stacks. Boots, you can either get Rakanos or Yen's Blessing for resistances, or you can get just like armor, max HP, dexterity, movement speed. Capellique, try to get, the most important thing is that the roll on the bottom is as close to 3% as possible. Amulet, you want percent armor, dexterity, and then potent. This is literally perfect, and potent is insane because each rank gives you basically 10% increased damage. On your ring, you want Ring of Midnight Sun. If you want a GA on it, probably would be dexterity, and make sure, just try to get as high of a crit value as possible. Try to have it be 50% from Gregor until you get a 50% one, probably. I'm going to go do that. And then on your other ring, you want dexterity, max HP, and armor. Attack speed. If you need resistances, getting a resistance all elements roll there is pretty good. And then you want to temper basic skill damage. Depending upon your resistances, you can either gem diamonds to max out your resistances, or you can gem skulls to then scale your unyielding hits more. When it comes to the mercenary, the reinforcements are almost useless a lot of the time. If you're playing in a group, you only get access to the reinforcement. I would just use Rahir with reinforcement Bastion because it gives you damage reduction, which is pretty good. Otherwise, if you are playing, you want to activate Rahir with armor, and then Mocking Lure because the armor will scale your unyielding hits, and this just gives you extra damage. That's pretty much it. Hopefully you guys found the video helpful. If you have questions, feel free to just swing by over on Twitch, or a lot of it will be answered in the build link. But I hope you guys found the video helpful. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys later. Peace out.